Hello, everybody, and welcome to our final interview of 2022. I have invited Dr. Roland McCrady to speak with me today. I'm going to read you because Roland has a very impressive background, so I'm actually going to read you some of his bio. He's Dr. Roland McCrady, a PhD, and he is the Director of Research and the Executive Vice President of the HeartMath Institute of Research. He is primarily concerned with the mechanisms by which emotions influence cognitive processes and behavior and health, as well as doing some fascinating research and really leading the field, I would say, in the connection between people and the Earth's systems, particularly the electromagnetic systems, which Roland has studied. Roland has also partnered with numerous universities and is a professor himself and is engaged in primary research for the last more than 30 years. So Roland, thank you so much for being with us. I know that you and I go back a little bit of a way through HeartMath, and I'm just so delighted and privileged actually to be able to speak with you today and for you to share your knowledge with us. So thank you.
My pleasure.
I wanted to ask you if you could just set the scene for us. We know that the heart is more than a mechanical pump. And I know that your research has focused primarily on the heart's influence on other processes and systems, particularly the brain, rather than the other way around. And I wonder, for those who aren't familiar with those mechanisms, whether you could just set the scene for us with a brief description of the heart's role, physiological role in the body.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. Trying to do that in a
short, you just think of the kindergarten version.
Most people, everyone really understands the heart as a blood pump, and that's even questionable that it's pumping as a traditional pump. But there's really four primary ways that the heart communicates with the brain, let's say, and really throughout the body. And the first one, where most of our efforts go, is through the nervous system, the nerves that connect the heart and brain through what's called the autonomic nervous system. And if we just focus there for a second, what I'm about to say has actually been known since the late 1800s. It's not some new discovery, largely forgotten and not actually taught to most healthcare professionals. That's starting to change a little bit. But the heart actually sends more information up to the brain through the nervous pathways that connect the heart, and the brain sends to the heart, actually by far. And it's been known for a long time, long before I came along, that I'll just call it, to keep it simple, the quality of the neural information being sent from the heart and the brain within the heart, called the intrinsic cardiac nervous system, profoundly affects brain function. Our perception has a lot to do with informing the brain how we feel, how the body feels and the heart feels. That's why we put our hands on our heart when we say, I love you. We don't say, I love you with all my head. We intuitively know this, right? So that's one way, and that we could do a whole interview just around that and the importance of that and the mechanisms, but I don't think we want to get into that level of the science. The second way is the heart secretes hormones. In fact, it was reclassified to be part of the endocrine, or the hormonal system, in the 1980s. And I won't name them all out, but the latest one in the research path of that research is oxytocin, which is relevant because nicknamed the love hormone or the bonding hormone. The heart secretes as much oxytocin as the brain. And in fact, it's probably the main neurotransmitter of the intrinsic cardiac nervous system, or the heart brain. So that has effects body-wide. Many other hormones as well that we would typically ascribe to the brain and other systems that have a lot of effects regulatory throughout the body. Energetically is one of my favorite that I talk a lot about. I think you enjoy too, Jeddah. So when the heart beats, generates, when we put electrodes on the body to measure the electrocardiogram, or for that matter, the brain to measure brain waves, we're measuring current flow. But whenever literally that's what's being measured. That's the technical thing. But whenever we have a flow of current, electrons, basically, we create a magnetic field. This is basic physics. Magnetic fields go through things. right? This is why cell phones work indoors. My previous career was a communication engineer. I used to work at Motorola, so the thing I know a little bit about, probably why we went down that research path. So we are literally radiating and broadcasting magnetic fields that we have already proven carry information, our states, for sure, our emotional states, probably a whole lot more, as we intuitively know, but for sure that. And so there's not only are we radiating and broadcasting, so our emotions, they don't just stop at the skin, but our nervous systems are exquisitely tuned to receiving and responding to other biologically generated fields like this. We have windows that we're responsive to. So that means that there's an energetic communication that's always going on between people, whether we know it, the unseen.
Yeah. And not just between people, between us and other creatures, other forms of life, and between us and what people would call inanimate objects, such as trees, which are not inanimate at all. They're living systems.
No, complex living systems.
Complex living systems, yes, exactly.
We're actually have a, meaning you mentioned trees, that's a project we finally got off the ground and have launched globally, is a project to measure the electrical activity of trees. So we're looking at actually that energetic communication between humans and trees and humans, and that could take us down another track. Fourth way, to get back to your original question, is biophysically pressure waves. Every time the heart beats, it creates a pressure wave. That's what we feel as our pulse. You can measure that if you're looking at brain waves. You can clearly see the heartbeat in the brain waves, and they call it artifacts in the EEG world because they're trying to get that pesky heart signal out of there. But I think that is starting to change in some circles. It's not an artifact; it's real, right? In fact, one of the things we measure often is how literally now I'm saying this, how in sync the heart and brain are, because our brain waves are synchronized to the activity of the heart. And so when we get in what I mean by this, but a heart coherent state,
yes,
we increase measurably the synchronization between heart and brain. And all of these things I'm talking about, when we get more in sync, have a wide range of benefits, both for our own personal health, mental clarity, that's how we clear the mental fog, accessing to our deeper intuition, right? And what we're feeding our field, the energy and the information we're feeding the field. So it has benefits for certainly our own personal health and happiness, but also socially. We start to deepen heart connections with others and kind of open those communication channels and to the planet itself.
Beautiful, amazing. And I know that you've been conducting this research for about 30 years or more. And what are some of the most fascinating or jaw-dropping things that you've discovered that people just simply don't know about in all this whole field that you've come across?
Yeah, I can name some of my favorites. Interesting that you asked that, because some of the, I would say, neatest, coolest, and really unexpected findings have been exactly that, unexpected. So I've kind of learned not to overly predict. Of course, we have hypotheses and we do studies and things, but it's really the surprises that lead to whole new directions that we wouldn't have expected. And one of them, which I probably should have in hindsight, given who we are and what we do, was when we looked at intuition. And so I talk about 3 types of intuition that we have, that everyone has. I'll go into detail here. One of those, we talk a lot about the heart's intuitive guidance, and that's the one thing we hear and have heard forever from people who learn the HeartMath skill set and how to become more physiologically coherent, is that their intuition's like on steroids. It's not just a subtle thing, it's a noticeable change. And the second thing is, and synchronicities have become a way of life. We hear that all the time. Synchronicities really come from intuition. We're following that from my perspective. So I'm going dialing back to the 1990s now, probably the later 90s, where we did in fact, I called those first studies the electrophysiology of intuition, where we did very rigorous, won't go into all the great details here, but studies where we had measuring brain waves and electrocardiograms and skin conductance and these other types of physiological measures. And to give a little more context here, in that original protocol, people were at a computer and seeing images that would show up on the computer. And the image that you would see was randomly selected It's either be a really yucky picture, like a bad guy with a knife at a woman's throat, or a snake striking at the screen, and pretty edgy stuff that would create an an unhappy emotional reaction, to put it that way. And on the other end would be photos of bunny rabbits and nature scenes and things like that. Yeah, there was no way you could possibly predict or know what the future picture was going to be. It was very carefully, randomly controlled. And what we were looking at was what happened in our physiology before you saw the picture, the pre-stimulus period, we called it. And the surprise that shouldn't have been a surprise in hindsight was that conventionally, that data showed that it was the heart that was the first to respond, predicting what the future picture was going to be. Then the heart sent a measurably different neural signal to the brain, and you had a brain response, and then the body response. The gut feeling, right? The hair on the back of the neck. That gets the credit. But in reality, it's heart, brain, body. And if you're paying attention, you get the feeling of it. And that's been confirmed in multiple other studies now that the heart's the big player here. So the way I got that published back then in peer-reviewed scientific journals is to say that the heart appears to have access to a field of information outside the limits or boundaries of time and space.
Let's talk about that. That's a fascinating sentence. So what do you think that field of information is?
I'm more out of the closet these days.
I think that's happening to us all. Go right ahead.
That's what here at HeartMath, we just call it our larger self. You can call it your higher self. You can call it your soul, your spirit. Like it is all of those things. Right. It's just different names, different cultures, and
different iterations of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's our energetic, part of our wholeness, our energetic wholeness. We really do have an energetic system. That's very clear, right? I think you got to be in dark ages to not realize that in today's world. And that's the part, we can't put an emotion under a microscope, right? Or a thought or an intuition. And those things ultimately exist and operate in an energetic system, not just our physiology, brains and hearts.
And is this energetic system over and above the electromagnetic system? Would you say the electromagnetic system is a part of it? Or is it just a carrier of information? How does that fit in?
That's a really deep and good question. And I would say both in answer to your question. So if we're talking about traditional electromagnetics that we can measure with voltmeters and magnetometers and things, no. Although there are the biologically generated signals that I was talking about earlier, absolutely, that are carriers of that information from us out into the world. But if we're talking about that other radio communication system as an analogy with our larger self, probably I would say actually yes, but we don't fully understand electromagnetism yet. There's actually a deeper level that Faraday himself actually talked about, who created the mathematics that were done away with because they were too complicated. I don't want to get electromagnetic potentials and these types of things, but so it probably is a type of a deeper aspect of electromagnetism that we haven't figured out how to measure yet.
And one aspect of electromagnetism, certainly in the human physiology, we can indeed measure. And that's what you've been doing at HeartMath. Yeah. And that,
and not just us. It's done millions of times around the world every day. If you measure brain waves or electrocardiogram, any electrical activity, you're measuring energetic system ultimately.
But HeartMath has been particularly active in looking at all living systems, right from the individual to individual coherence, to the groups with social coherence, to living systems, living nature systems, but also the planet, the whole planet, measuring the electromagnetics of the whole planet. So that's really joining up those dots of individual and group and society and planet with the Earth. And I think
something you know a little bit about, because
yes, I know a little bit about. Yeah, I've always found it fascinating in my relationship with HeartMath over the years now, which is stemming back like 15 years, that every time I speak with you, I'm part of a meeting or an update on the research, that you've just been broadening the scope of your research and coming across just You mentioned earlier, you said the really cool and unexpected stuff. And so maybe we can cycle back to that and ask you what you found there in that connection between the individual and
Well,
all the iterations of that system.
yeah. In fact, it would be probably my second thing I would talk about in terms of the surprise. It
Mhm.
wasn't expected or predicted. It was exactly in this arena, which I know, Jeddah, you're well aware of the global coherence monitoring system, which are, for those that aren't familiar with that, ultra-sensitive magnetometers that are specifically designed to measure the moving parts of the magnetic fields generated by the Earth or around by the Earth and around the Earth. And just to give a little context here, I think most people know what the geomagnetic field is, right? The North Pole, the South Pole, I think our compasses moves to compass needles, right? That we tune into, which is a shield. Thank God we've got that. There's Earth. It wouldn't be life as we know it on Earth without
Right.
the magnetic field. And but what we don't think of, because it is a static field, like a refrigerator magnet, it's a pure magnetic field. So you tend to think of that as a static, non-moving field. But here's the cool part that I actually didn't learn back in high school when we were taught about geomagnetic fields and all that stuff, is that magnetic fields, what are called magnetic field lines, which you can actually see when you dump iron filings on you stick your magnet in there. They organize in lines. But you don't just see the size and shape of the field. You're actually visualizing the field lines. Magnetic field lines act just like a string on an instrument, like guitar or whatever instrument that has the string on it. And you can pluck it and they vibrate, right? So same thing happens with magnetic fields. You can pluck them and they literally vibrate. In fact, the technical term is called field line resonances. And so at the scale of Earth, they're really long. And depending upon the tension, just like in our guitar string, the tension, the length, that controls its resonant frequency. So they're low frequencies, and what's plucking them is the solar wind rushing by, and they're vibrating. So one of the wild things, and that was actually been measured before I came along. Nobody just put the dots together, but we clearly see this in our global magnetometer system. Is the frequency of the field line resonances, one of the primary resonant frequencies, is 0.1 hertz in frequency language, which is the same frequency as human heart rhythms when we're in that coherent state, which we naturally are into when we're more loving, caring, compassionate, feeling kindness, and so on. Our physiology shifts into a very optimal state that we call heart coherence. So our primary resonant frequency, which it is an literal resonant frequency in our body, is the same as the Earth's primary resonant frequency, electromagnetically speaking.
It's just, I've heard that so many times, and every time I hear it, it just drops me into the same state of wonder as the first time I heard it. It's so confirming, just that one little fact. And you hear every spiritual tradition, philosophy, religion on the planet speaks of love and wisdom. And here, right in the heart, which just we all carry, seems to be this combination of love and wisdom coming together. And why do you think, what is it about the heart, both we've talked about on a physical level, but maybe on a metaphysical level, what is it about the heart which means it is like the governance of our being and so responsible for our well-being?
If physiologically, I talked about how the heart operates across multiple systems: hormonal, biophysical, energetic, heart, brain. I would answer that by saying we have the physical heart, but then at the energetic system level, we have the energetic heart. The energetic heart is that bridge or transceiver, whatever language we want to use here, to our larger self, which is vibrating and operating in a different dimension of density. It's real, but I'm saying it's real.
Right.
We just can't stick a probe in the center of it yet. It's part of what behind the scenes hoping to be able to do. We can measure results of it in physiology. That doesn't mean it's not real. Nobody can prove it's not. It's like I can't yet prove it is that way.
But nobody can prove it's not.
Yeah, other than through our own intuitions and personal experience. So I know this is of really aligning with that, and that's really where our deeper intuitions come from. So what I'm really saying, Jed, is that the intuitions that count, our inner guidance system, are really the information flowing from that part of ourself. I'm not saying it's some big one field. I'm literally saying we each have our own individual larger
Right.
self. It's our best friend when we learn how to align with it. So that intuitive guidance is the information coming from that higher vibrational part of ourself through the energetic heart, which then communicates with the DNA and all the cells and the mind. And that's who we're talking to when we talk to our deeper self, is our own larger self. So the energetic heart is that bridge.
And what influence does that energetic heart, and indeed the physical heart, have on our DNA, if any?
I would say it's the master regulator of our DNA.
Right.
As you're well versed in this as I am, but the big project to map the DNA, right? Genome. What big surprise there was, wait a minute, the missing information.
I know. It's like at CERN with Hadron Collider, and you think how many billions and billions of research dollars are going into this to find the next particle, and you just want to put up your finger and say, "Excuse me, have you even thought about looking over here?" What you're talking about sounds like the next wave of science, because science that was really pushing the boundaries of what we know and not just being content with what we're told or recreating known experiments, but really moving into new areas and discovering things and making that available for humanity, which is really what HeartMath has been doing so excellently for so many decades. It used to be called frontier science, but I think almost now it's got to it needs like a new name. It's still science, it's still as rigorous research, but it almost needs a new name. So what's next in terms of what you want to look at and what you want to test out?
Great question. And but before I answer it, I didn't tell you the surprise yet.
Oh, okay. Let's do that.
Yeah, we got off in an interesting direction there. So looking at the Earth's resonant frequencies, I took us off track there.
Right.
We had the global, so we started to do studies where people were recorders that record their heart rate variability, HRV, for long periods. One study, 5 months, where people were wearing them for 24 hours a day after day. And the first study that was where the surprise came from, the blank, what's going on here, was in a group of people here in California, but they were spread across the state. Some were in the southern part of the state, were in the recorders, some north of me, some central. Most of them didn't know each other. It's not like they're hanging out together, holding hands, meditating or something for a month. So they wore these for a month. And the surprise came, the original question, Jeddah, was to look at how we're affected by changes in the electromagnetic environment we live in. And there were a ton of those, by the way. This is all published now. But the surprise came when we synchronized, all the recorders have accurate clocks, so we can line up the data and synchronize it, and just averaged it together. I don't even know why we did it in hindsight, but one of the things we did. And expecting a noisy kind of flat line. Why in the world would the beat-to-beat change in my heart rate have anything to do with somebody I don't even know in the southern part of the state, hundreds of miles away, or somebody else hundreds of miles away the other direction? It's not what we found. What that showed was that people's a slower rhythm in their heart rhythms they were synchronized.
Amazing.
And so what? And I'll be honest, it's a little embarrassing, but it took about a week or two to figure out one of our own hypotheses in the Global Coherence Institute. What's the answer? And that the only thing that could really explain that is if we are synchronizing to a rhythm of a resonant frequency in the Earth's magnetic field. And when you overlay, the graph is like jaw-dropping when you look at the synchronized rhythm of the heart rhythms of the group of people with the power of the resonant frequencies in the Earth's field. You don't have to even do statistics. But overlay, of course, we did statistics. But so that was a huge surprise. I would never have predicted the degree of synchronization of how we synchronize with the resonant frequencies in the Earth's field. We've seen hints of it. Nobody had ever done long-term 24-hour a day for a month-long recordings of people before, and had a way of accurately measuring the magnetic field, the resonant frequencies in the field. A lot of magnetometers out there, but they're not designed to measure the time varying or resonant frequencies in the Earth's field. So it was like, we spent, God, I can't talk today, 6 months trying to make this go away. To really make sure this was just too.
Yeah, that it wasn't a fluke.
Yeah, exactly. And again, couldn't. In fact, it kept getting better the more we tried to refine it. So we've more recently replicated that on a global scale with groups. In fact, you might have been part of that. I don't remember the international HRV synchronization study.
That's right.
I think you
yes, I was part of a
group in the UK. So
That's
we had
right.
groups of 20 people in 5 countries.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, here's another surprise, and I just got to share this one. So it was to replicate that original study, but globally. But another surprise, which we did, by the way, came though in the middle of that. If you probably recall, we organized a time for all the participants in all these groups, well over 100 people, to do one of the HeartMath techniques, a heart lock-in, focus on the heart, radiate love, and all the other group members for 15 minutes. And again, another one of those almost unbelievable but true of things that happened was that on the day that all these groups around the planet did that at the same time, their synchronization with the Earth's field was dramatically increased over the next 24-hour period. So just being in that heart coherent state, three things: increased our coherence personally measured, also increased the literal heart-to-heart synchronization amongst the group members in those groups, and their synchronization with the Earth's field.
And fascinating for people to hear that heart coherence with one's own being, with others, and with the Earth has these longer term effects. One would imagine, that'll last for 20 minutes or so, but to see that carries on. And
that was a surprise.
Yeah. And HeartMath has been teaching these heart coherence techniques for as long as you've been doing research, and showing people how to step into coherence and providing tools and devices to measure that, and providing opportunities for people to take part in the synchronized heart care focus and things like that, and provided many wonderful tools and opportunities for people to do that. So I know part of your mission, and then we'll go forward again. We came back because we needed those beautiful surprises and not be carried away by my enthusiasm and excitement. But it's really nice to know that this is not wishful thinking. There's so many of these initiatives that have these good intentions and provide all of these opportunities, but aren't able on the other side to be measuring this and turning it into useful data and turning it into making the case for why we need to be doing this stuff for ourselves, for our environments, and for the Earth itself. So the news is all good. It's a wonderful story. Amazing. So I'm curious, because I know we don't have long now. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about where you would like to go next and what you would like to move towards.
I want to help initiate a global movement, to really adding love and compassion in a structured and intentional way for people to participate. They already are doing this, but it needs to really expand to where we become more self-responsible for our own vibration and what we're feeding the field. And it's the energetics of our own system count, but also the planet. So what I'm really saying, Jed, is that we're always coupled through the resonance with what I call the global field environment, information field environment. So as we feed the field more love, kindness, compassion, that affects all living systems within the big global field. And this is the key to the consciousness shift that we all talk about and are part of, do and create that shift. But it's not going to happen for us. We
Right.
have to do it. So that's really my personal kind of focus. And that's why we're developing things like the Global Coherence app that measures our coherence globally in global groups and kind of tracks what we're feeding the global field, and why we have the tree monitoring system, the Global Coherence Project. And we've also just taken over the Global Consciousness Project as part of our.
From Roger Nelson?
Yeah, he asked. Quite an honor, actually. I tried to talk him out of it because, no, Roland, you're the only person I trust to take this over. And so we're developing a new version of that will be ready to be actually launched in a lot of very technical, intense project. And so we'll be launching that later this year. And so in other words, we're under one roof, we'll be able to monitor the people and their coherence, trees, the Earth's magnetic field environment, and then with the Global Consciousness Project, this new envisioning of it, which is really, you can think of as a globally distributed scientific instrument that's measuring the global consciousness field in another way. So I think it'll be at least we're putting the tools together for a new era of science, of the science of interconnectivity, and how we all, how many times do we say, Jeddah, on some level, we're all interconnected, right?
Yeah.
These are giving us the tools to actually measure that and look at some of the potential mechanisms of how we really are deeply and fundamentally interconnected with each other, not only with our own larger self, with each other and with the Earth and ultimately the cosmos stuff as well, which we're already seeing some hints of.
So it's gratifying, encouraging, reassuring. It just propels you into a state of appreciation and wonder, really, and reverence too, for this incredible thing called life, that whether we study it just philosophically or whether we really start to look at the scientific mechanisms of how it operates, it never fails to deliver this wonder and this incredible awe and beauty. So it's so wonderful to hear it. And you've given us so many great pictures to carry in our minds. I love the one of the Earth with the strings and how the solar winds are plucking. And this is something we can all visualize, and particularly as we're going about our day. So on that note, I'm just wondering, before we finish up and say goodbye, that love and compassion and kindness and appreciation, really what you said, come down to our personal responsibility. At Intelligent Life, we're always talking about responsibility and contribution. And I think that that's what you're saying too, that we're all responsible for the contribution we make to our own experience, that of our environment and the planet itself. And that the planet is influencing us in return. That's a two-way mechanism.
It's a giant biofeedback system.
It's a giant biofeedback system. What would you encourage people to do who would like to take this further and want to either study more or learn some techniques? Where would you direct people's attention?
Thank you for asking. HeartMath.org website would be a great place. We just released a new edition of the book Heart Intelligence. I think it's a great non-scientific kind of start, even though there's a couple chapters in there that's a co-authored book by Doc Childrey, the founder of HeartMath, myself, Deborah Rosman, Howard Martin. And so there are some science chapters, but they're really simple,
digestible.
Yeah, but it's really more about the practice and how do you experience this. And if you're more into the science, another one of my books called The Science of the Heart is a nice starting place. And of course, then if you want to really take this on and take it for yourself and the world, become a certified trainer. Now, there's multiple options for that as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Roland, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. And I always leave our conversations feeling so uplifted. And you really do change the way I see the world. And I want to thank you so much on behalf of our whole audience for your incredible track record of work and for your curiosity, your willingness, your dedication, your perseverance, and for your care, that you've been just such an amazing proponent of this work, and that you've not single-handedly, because I know you're part of an amazing team, but you have been at the head of that team for a long time. So you've been spearheading some of the most important research that this planet has ever seen. And you're unlocking some of the mysteries and keys that we really need for us all to be able to come together and step into this new way. So thank you so much for all of that on behalf of all of us. And keep up the good work.
I will indeed.
Bye for now.
Have a great day, everyone.